The storm had been coming all morning, the kind that didn't announce itself with thunder or drama, but with a hush that felt like a held breath. Snow fell sideways, thin needles at first, then thicker, heavier, until the world narrowed to whatever stood an arm's length ahead. Silas Crow moved through it slowly, each step measured, boots breaking the crusted white like a man apologizing to the earth for passing through. He had lived alone long enough to know when to turn back, but something in the air felt unfinished, as if the mountain itself were waiting for him to notice what it was trying to hide. The wind carried sounds that weren't sounds at all, old memories brushing past his ears. His wife's laugh once, the crackle of a fire that had gone cold years ago. He pulled his coat tighter, beard stiff with frost, eyes scanning the blur of white and shadow. That was when he saw it, a dark shape slumped near the tree line, half swallowed by drifting snow. Not a stump, not a fallen pack animal. Something smaller, something wrong. Silas stopped. The storm pressed around him, impatient. He stepped closer and knelt, brushing snow away with thick, trembling fingers. A woman's face emerged, pale as the sky above it, lashes rimmed with ice. Her hair, once likely tied neat and practical, had come loose and clung to her cheeks. One hand was bare, red and swollen, curled around the handle of a dented cooking pot as if it were the last thing tethering her to this world. Her eyes opened slowly, sharp even now, proud even now. "Don't," she said, her voice thin but steady, when he tried to lift her. "I can manage." Silas swallowed. "Storm says otherwise." She gave a faint, humorless breath that might have been a laugh. "Storm doesn't know me." Her name, she told him after a moment, was Agnes Holloway. She had been the cook-up at Harlan Pike's place for more years than she could count. Fed hands, boiled coffee, kept men standing through winters that took younger bones than hers. That morning, Pike had told her she was too slow, too old. He'd handed her a sack with her things and said the storm wouldn't last, said she could make it down the mountain if she hurried. "I did hurry," she said, eyes slipping shut again. "Just not fast enough." Silas didn't answer. He lifted her then, carefully, as if she were made of glass and iron both. Her weight surprised him. Not heavy, but real, undeniable. A life. The wind shoved at his back as he turned toward home, each step a quiet argument with the mountain. Agnes stirred against his chest, murmuring apologies, as though being found were an inconvenience. He remembered another walk once, years ago, when his wife's breath had come shallow like this, when the world had felt too big and too indifferent. He had been younger then, less careful. The mountain had taken her anyway. That memory pressed against him now, but he kept moving, jaw set, heart steadying itself around a single thought. Not this time. The cabin rose out of the storm like a promise kept. Smoke curled thin from the chimney, stubborn against the wind. Inside, warmth bloomed slowly, fire crackling to life as Silas laid Agnes near the hearth. He peeled off her frozen coat, wrapped her in blankets that smelled of pine and old winters. When she woke again, color had crept back into her cheeks, and embarrassment flickered across her face before relief could settle. "I don't aim to stay," she said quickly. "Soon as the storm breaks." Silas handed her a tin cup. "Drink." She did. Soup, thick and simple, steam fogging the air between them. Her hands shook as she ate, but they knew the motions by heart. A cook's hands. Useful hands. When she finished, she wiped the rim clean without thinking, habit speaking louder than pride. She talked then, softly, as if afraid the walls might overhear. About long days and longer nights, about feeding men who never asked how she was doing, only if the food was hot. About how easy it was to become part of the background, like a kettle or a bench. How one day you realize you've been standing in the same place for years, and the world has started stepping around you. Silas listened. He didn't interrupt. He had learned, over time, that listening was sometimes the only kind of help a person needed. By the time the storm reached its worst, the town already knew. News traveled strangely in the West, slower than a horse, faster than shame. At the store, Mabel Finch leaned across the counter and lowered her voice, saying Silas Crow had taken in Harlan Pike's old cook. Some said it with pity, others with suspicion. Harlan himself shrugged and claimed it was mercy he'd ever employed her at all. The sheriff heard it too. He said nothing. Back at the cabin, Agnes insisted on standing, on stirring the pot, on making herself useful. Silas watched her from the doorway, the firelight catching in the lines of her face, softening them into something almost young. Not beautiful in the way the town understood beauty, but steady, enduring. They ate together as the wind howled outside, the storm battering the walls, tried to remind them both how small they were. Agnes met his eyes once, just for a second, and something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people who knew what it was to be left behind. Two people who had survived anyway. Outside, the snow kept falling, relentless and quiet. Inside, the fire held. Morning arrived, without ceremony. The storm loosened its grip in small mercies. Less wind, more light, a silence that felt earned rather than empty. Agnes woke before Silas, as she always had in other men's kitchens, and sat quietly by the hearth, listening to the cabin breathe. Her body still ached, but it was a clean ache now, the kind that meant she was still here. When she stood, slowly, testing herself, she did not fall. That alone felt like a victory worth keeping to herself. By the time Silas rose, the kettle was already warming. He paused in the doorway, surprised, then said nothing. Agnes poured the water with steady hands, her movements careful but sure, as if reminding her own bones who they had been all along. She did not thank him again. She showed it instead, by mending a torn glove, by sweeping snow tracked in from his boots, by cooking a meal that tasted of patience and memory. Silas understood that language better than most. He accepted her help the way a man accepts daylight, without question, without debt. Days passed like that, gentle and uncounted. Agnes grew stronger. Color returned to her face. She laughed once, unexpectedly, at something small, and the sound startled them both. It lingered in the cabin long after it faded, settling into the corners like warmth. In the evenings, they sat near the fire, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel less alone. Their conversations were unhurried, stitched together from silences as much as words. When Silas finally rode into town for supplies, Agnes went with him. She wore his spare coat, too large for her, sleeves rolled back with care. The street quieted when they passed. Eyes followed them, measuring, weighing. Mabel Finch's gaze lingered longest, sharp with curiosity and something like regret. Harlan Pike stood near the hitching post, jaw tight, watching the woman he had written off walk tall beside another man. At the store, talk stumbled. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else pretended to be busy. Agnes felt the weight of it all, but did not bow under it. She set her shoulders, met their looks with calm, unflinching eyes. For the first time in years, she was not asking permission to exist. Harlan found them outside. He spoke too loudly, words shaped like generosity but hollow at the center. Said the storm had been worse than he expected. Said he could use a good cook again. Said there was a bed waiting if she wanted to come back. He did not apologize. He did not look at her hands. Agnes turned to Silas, not for guidance, but for space. He gave it. "What do you want?" he asked quietly, as if the town were not listening. She faced Harlan then. Her voice did not shake. She told him she had given him years, and he had given her a door in a blizzard. She said she would not be returning to a place where her worth depended on her speed. The street held its breath. Somewhere behind them, the sheriff shifted his weight. Sheriff Amos Bell stepped forward at last. His words were plain, not cruel, but they carried. He spoke of responsibility, of winters that killed more than cold ever could. He did not name Harlan's shame outright, but he let it stand in the open long enough for everyone to see it. Harlan said nothing. There was nowhere left to put his excuses. Silas took off his coat, then, and settled it properly around Agnes's shoulders, adjusting the collar so the wind could not reach her neck. The gesture was simple. It landed heavy. Not ownership, not rescue, just care, offered without condition. They left town together as they had entered, quietly. Behind them, something had shifted, Not the laws, not the world, but the way a few people would sleep that night, knowing what they had witnessed and what they had allowed before. Life at the cabin found a new rhythm. Agnes did not belong to Silas, and he never pretended she did. She stayed because she chose to. She cooked because she loved it, not because she was required. He split wood. She tended the fire. In the evenings, their chairs drifted closer, inch by earned inch. Sometimes their hands brushed. Sometimes they didn't. Neither rushed the moment into a name. Spring came slowly, as it always did, but it came. Snow thinned. The mountains softened. One morning, Agnes stood outside, face tilted to the sun, and Silas realized he had stopped worrying about the quiet. It no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like peace shared. If there's a thing this old world teaches, it is this: people are not worn out by years, but by being unseen. Dignity is not granted by towns or titles. It is restored when one person decides another is worth stopping for, worth carrying through the storm, worth standing beside when the cold tries to have the last word. And sometimes that small act of grace is enough to change everything.